Do School Better, a podcast for people who want to transform education. My name is Doris, and this season we're going to take you behind the scenes into my entrepreneurship course at Hawkins School. Allison Tanker and I discuss the day-to-day of teaching a rigorous interdisciplinary course where students learn the critical skills they'll need to be successful in the world.
In this episode, Doris speaks with Terry Chou, science teacher at Joaquin Miller Middle School in San Jose, California. Terry shares details about her students learning innovation in her Science Enrichment and Research class, also known as the Search class.
Hey, Terry.
Hi.
I'm really excited to hear more about your Search class. And you came to the workshop, the very first one we did, back at Steve Blank's house in his living room in the summer of 2014. And we actually communicated quite a bit before you came because you were really doing your homework, I remember, to find a place to go. And I remember you're telling me that you were, a middle school science teacher at a public school in California, and you really wanted to find ways to excite your students.
Yeah, I was looking for, I was in the process of creating the Search class, which came about because I wanted to teach innovation on math, and I needed to find ways to do that. And originally, the class that I had in mind was sort of like a science fair class, a science fair prep class, pure research, but thinking back and forth that entire school year leading up to the summer, I realized I really didn't want to teach that what I really wanted to teach was innovation. And then learning a little bit more about what innovation meant, it's the intersection of science, business, and technology. And so the business part, when it fell into place there, I realized I needed to sort of investigate the business perspective because I didn't have a business background. I'm completely a science teacher, science person, studied science in college, and so on. And so in looking at business perspective, my brother-in-law, actually, who did study business, he suggested that I look into the lean startup movement.
Yep.
And from there, from the lean startup movement, I came across Mr. Blank. And so I actually emailed him about, I'd like to learn more about this program. I'm a teacher. I have this class that I have in my head that I'd like to kind of fulfill. And, did he have any suggestions for me where I can start? Because I had no background. And so he actually was the one who forwarded my email to
me.
You. Yes. At that point was like, oh, great. There's this workshop that I can go to as someone who didn't have any business background or anything like that, but had an idea for using entrepreneurship in a science elective class. And so it kind of fell in place perfectly, timing-wise, and curricularly, just to be able to immerse myself in that realm, that the business sort of world that I don't have personal experience with. And so that really kind of kickstarted. And as I learned more about Lean Launchpad and the Lean Startup, I realized it was a perfect fit because essentially the philosophy used the scientific method to validate all of your assumptions on 9 core aspects of a startup business. And it just fell into place at that point. Very nicely.
It's great. And then, of course, the curriculum you build around that. So that's, it's like in a science class, you may employ the scientific method, but how you go about teaching science and teaching the students and getting the students to learn science is all about a whole bunch of other things. And you created a course coming out of that workshop. And I remember talking to you in the fall multiple times as you were looking for how to engage the students. And it's interesting because you came in thinking you needed to learn about business, and that's what you were looking for. But I actually think this all falls under the heading of innovation.
Yeah, and I think especially as I started in the fall, so I basically went from workshop to actually teaching the course.
Yeah, I remember.
I was able to readily use, like, I needed to use different tools and sort of come at it right away with this. And as I started in the fall, a lot of things just kind of, I realized a few things. One of the things first is that the business part is really like a scaffold.
Yep.
And that scaffold allows students to formalize and they communicate ideas in their head. But the creation, sort of the process of the product design and all that, using technology, trying to figure out which technology would match my students best, that we hammered out throughout the fall, and then I think probably midway, sometime by winter, I started to realize that the innovation part was great, but really this class, at least for my class, was all about learning really deeply about yourself, the students themselves, and how they interact with people, how they communicate with people, and essentially the concept for me became, okay, we're really, as a teacher, my job is really to elevate these groups of students into teams of students, otherwise the innovation just wouldn't happen. Even if they had a wonderful business and they're kind of chugging along with the product won't come to be its full potential if the team wasn't completely on board. And so then by the spring, when I had sort of my second iteration of the class, since it's a semester-long class, I was able to try to focus more on that aspect. And I think since that point, I think that's been something that I've kept in my head as, yes, the business is important, yes, the learning of science and writing the literature review, as well as learning the tech and building the product, but ultimately none of it will really push itself to its full potential without the team understanding they have to work together as a team. And so it's been great, actually, as a teacher, because, I get to then consult and advise teams. And I treat each little startup company as a team from the get-go. Yep. I tell them how important it is for them to really think of each other as a team and not as a group. And I think semester after semester, we've seen it's been more amazing projects, one after another. Yep. So, and it's all from the same business structure and the same tech. It's sort of driving home that message that you have to interact with each other as a team. There's just you can have all the fancy dreams you want, but if you want an actual product to be made and communicated well, it has to come from a team mentality first.
Right, and that's where all of the approaches that we've built that have to do with teams having a real challenge that they find meaningful.
Right.
And with a deadline where they have to come up with a solution, and all those approaches around collaborating productively, feedback, how you give each other feedback, how you identify your strengths, bring them to a team, identify all that stuff that we talk about, that actually is the most powerful part of the whole thing.
Right, and I would agree with that, because the science, the business, the tech, at least for search class, really, in order to see it through to its maximum potential that one semester can offer the students, they don't have that much time, actually. And so if they cannot coalesce together, if they cannot resolve their conflicts sooner than later, and they realize this at the very end of the experience, then at the end they realize, oh, you know what? Maybe it's better that we resolve these conflicts as soon as they show up. Maybe we do need to I personally need to contribute more when I see either myself or someone else is kind of drifting off and they're not being productive, they're not coming in and helping to design. And so I think some of them definitely say in their reflection blogs that they realize that they're better as a leader on the side. They'll kind of be able to be a quiet leader. Some have said they like just being able to be at the forefront and sort of dictating as they go, but they realize who they are. Yeah. And they come to a clearer understanding of, I'm a talker, I like to, actively bring people into I now know I need to step up my game because I let it go. I let everything procrastinate too much, I'm better off on the side. I'm a quiet leader, and I see that now.
And I see that has just as much value. It's just that's who I am, and that's how I contribute.
Exactly. And so I think that I would identify as the most important thing that is learned in my class. Even though they do learn business, they do learn science, and they do learn all this tech, every semester it just comes back to they learn more about themselves than anything else.
And I would argue that is consistent with every single, everybody who does this and implements in their own completely unique way in whatever class and whatever school with whatever age students says the same thing. They learn crazy amounts of some particular science, or they learned a new technology, or they really developed their writing, but more than anything else, they learned about themselves. And the reason we overuse these words, and I wish there were new ones, but the reason it's so transformative for many of these students is because they realize the extent to which they're able to learn, what I can do, how I can contribute. It isn't this closed conversation between the teacher and the student. Teacher gives student an assignment. Mm-hmm. Student does what he or she's told to do, hands it back to the teacher. Teacher pats on head or doesn't pat on head, says good job, and it's done. There's this, in addition to working on authentic problems, doing the work as a team makes it meaningful and relevant and urgent, and they take ownership of what they're doing in a way that they don't if they're just an individual contributor in a classroom.
Right, and even if they're not. So, like, the whole project-based learning, curricular design, I was just talking about this to someone at a conference that I had spoken at, the Fab Learn conference.
Yeah.
2 weekends ago, and I was talking to them about project-based learning, and he came at it with, project-based learning is great, and these kids get into groups, and then they do this project for, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then they're done with the project, and then it's done. And they disband, and it's as if they move on to a new project, so it's as if they really didn't learn as much, because it somehow truncated their learning. It was done. The piece was done, they got their grades, and then they moved on to a new project, new groups, and so on. And we were talking about search class, actually, and I appreciated his comment on, it's interesting because when you set it up like this, where the kids come up with that problem, and then they have to pursue the solution, and it's almost like even after the class is done, there's still reason to move forward.
Absolutely.
The project is never truly, unless you're actually going to build your business and start your company, there's still so much more opportunity beyond just that particular project or that class. And so, in some ways, this type of class where students define and then pursue solutions, or define the problem and pursue solutions of their own, I think does more to promote lifelong learners than simply sort of the traditional classroom group project.
I agree.
The borders are blown wide open. This project can literally go to as far as you want it to. And so it kind of actively gets students to think about, what's the next step? Versus a lot of projects, even the project-based learning kind of projects, there's an end point and then you have to move on. But this type of situation, it's almost begging students, what's your next step? What's your next step? What do you have in plan next? And there's always a next.
Yeah, because it's what they're working on is real, and it doesn't just, it's not here's your assignment, project or not an assignment, and when you're finished, you're finished. There's this real thing, and you're building, you're innovating, and they're passionate about what they're doing. We had a student we were talking to today who's in a space where they're actively working to define the problem that they're working on in the music space, where the four of them are wildly passionate. And he is crazy excited about the opportunity to work on something he's actually interested in a class, in school. And one of the things that I think this does is when you say lifelong learner, it redefines students' relationships with school.
Right.
Because they have this, they come into these kinds of classes before they've done a class like this. They come in thinking, the way this school thing works and my relationship to school is somebody gives me something to do that I must learn. I then learn it well or not, and I get, some sort of feedback to tell me whether I learned it well enough or not. And we just kind of rinse and repeat that. And when they realize that my learning about and researching something I'm interested in, I'm genuinely passionate about, also constitutes learning and can even be done within what's considered an academic course, that changes how they look at themselves learning in school. And I agree, that opens them up to looking at learning as something they want to do.
Right, and I think that's definitely something all teachers want to promote, and redesigning their classrooms, or their curricula, I should say, is definitely one way to think about when they want that result. And I think that also in some sense, I really wish that I were able to take this class, and I think I probably would have had such a different trajectory in life as well. But I think...
oh, that's really interesting. Why?
Well, I don't know, because I think, for me, I didn't actually give business a chance. I mean, I knew I really wanted to be an educator, but that also, in my head, it never occurred to me to even give business a chance. Or even the startup world where, science and technology is pretty much integrated into the business, at least in Silicon Valley. That's where we're at. It just never occurred to me that I would find a place for myself there. But I'm glad I didn't. I mean, I think in education there is so much to innovate, which kind of gets me to think that I think maybe one of the keys for teachers is, in order to sort of help a lot of the teachers out there, bring them into this new perspective, is that they need to think of themselves as an innovator as well. And that, they may not be in a trendy, high-tech Silicon Valley, startup, but that doesn't mean that teachers can't be those innovators, and we innovate on our curriculum. That's how we are able to push the boundaries and for ourselves become that lifelong learner too. I just so appreciate actually having experience now of teaching this entrepreneurship kind of aspect in my class. It's, I think it's been a great thing for me.
You said that beautifully. I couldn't agree more. And I really will say, I don't even think it's about business. I think everything you're talking about is about innovation.
Right. I totally agree. I think innovation, the spirit of innovation, and just the pursuit of it is really critical for student and teachers alike. And, I think coming away from this particular conference that just happened, so it's fresh in my head, that, it is a movement. I truly do believe that. It is not some passing fad, or, a maker space might be a fad, the sort of a room that people go to drill and to laser cut and to 3D print, but the maker education movement, the movement towards innovation from the teacher's perspective as well. Sort of, I don't know if there's an umbrella term for all of it, but that sort of thinking, I think it is something that once started, the ripple effects is just going to continue.
I could not agree more. And you said all of that so well. I'm going to end that here, but that was fabulous. Thank you, Terry. And I loved seeing the excitement of your students when I came to visit you, and they were on fire. And by the way, learning not only about innovation and customer development and pitching and communications, but also learning a lot of science, and they were jazzed about it.
Right. Yes, they can see finally how science is applicable to their lives.
That's awesome. Hey, have a great day. Thanks, Terry.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Do School Better. We would love to hear from you, so please leave us a comment or a review. And if you're interested in learning more, check out wildfire-education.org.